Добрий день, з вами Ольга Атаманова.
Good afternoon, my name is Olga Atamanova, and it's my pleasure to see everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum, joining us both offline and online. So today we have invited you to join our panel discussion. We will discuss an important topic. It's feminization of the modern trends and the role of women in reconstruction of Ukraine. So let me introduce our speakers. Joining us today are Svitlana Voitsekhovska, co-founder of the Ukrainian Women's Congress, Milena Goryachkovska, project coordinator at the Ukrainian Women's Fund, Yaryna Voloshyn, head of the communication department at JurFem, Ukrainian Women Lawyers Association. And right about to join us in the studio is Oksana Hryhorieva, gender advisor to the commander of the ground forces of the armed forces of Ukraine. So today, with the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we understand that the challenges that we're all facing, they are real significant, and they are something that influence lives of all of us. I mean, the movement of our people abroad, inside the country's mobilization processes, according to the latest data since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, according to the information from the general staff, 47 women were a part of the armed forces of Ukraine, including 4,000 in the forward edge of the battle area. So I would like to start our conversation with the question: is it safe to say that feminization of the job market is going on, and can we say it's a formulated trend for the time being? Thank you. Well, the matter of feminization of economy is pretty complicated and complex matter, because you know those trends, they do not develop within such a short period like the one we have in our country. Just let me remind you that only in the year 2017 the list of the professions that were restricted for employment of women, this list was rescinded, and even after it ceased to exist, the trend maintained by that list is still ongoing. Well, you've mentioned the armed forces of Ukraine. So far, the women are still not allowed to take officers' position, at least not all of them. Also, I know that the women are restricted from military service in submarines, in the Navy. So basically, within the last 10 years, the labor market has changed significantly. The war made its corrections that if we check the latest statistics, the Ministry of Economy was making a research that they've published, and they say 60% of the businesses don't have enough employees. It all results from mobilization, migration. 30% is because of the low salary, but at the same time 60% of the population that is still working, they think that they will change their jobs because their salary is low. Definitely mobilization and the fact that the large fraction of men are in the front lines, the businesses started looking to have their employees substituted. I know that a number of retailer chains announce training courses for women. There is also the similar story going on in the mining companies who announced a training course for truck drivers. But honestly, until this day, I don't see any government policy aimed at replacement of men in these professions with women. Because talking about, for example, reconstruction will require technical personnel, engineers, construction workers, and unfortunately we have not educated any women in those professions. Engineering, construction works, they are absolutely male professions. Men cannot be replaced with women there within one day. We will need more time to train female specialists in this area. Thank you, Ms. Milena. So are you sensing that the feminization is going on really? And if so, in which fields of economy can we observe this phenomena? Well, feminization is a little bit of exaggeration. There is a trend of women joining those areas of economy that were traditionally considered like men's areas, but the full-scale war, it highlighted the existing segregation in the labor market and the fact that the women are currently entering that area is the mitigation of that disbalance and thus balancing the job market, because many areas they are, so to say, in the risk zone if the vacancies are not being filled. And let me add to what Ms. Svitlana Voitsekhovska has mentioned. Even without any restriction, the problems are not yet mitigated. There is some inertia in the labor markets. To have the changes now, we should have done something a couple of years ago. And to have those changes coming within a couple of years, we have to act right now. So this inertia is related to a number of phenomena. First, it's education, the segregation in the area of education. Like Ms. Svitlana has mentioned, some professions will be in more demand in Ukraine, such as technical professions, construction workers, engineering professions. And in the area of education, the segregation is pretty severe. 60–70% of the students for those professions are males. At the same time, our partners set us with the support of Women's Female Union. They've made a study of segregation in higher education, and they found out that the level of training of both males and females is equally high, and sometimes females have even better ratings. And in those engineering professions, the girls enter those institutions with higher ratings than the boys do, which means that those stereotypes, they are inside of our heads. They are the restricting factor. But to make sure those vacancies are filled at the level of selection, not only on the lowest level, but at the, I mean, the level of workers, but also at the level of engineers, managers. We have to promote those professions for our girls, to train the skilled specialists. And yet another factor is the lack of experience, because you cannot move forward in your career without experience, and you cannot get any experience if you don't work, right? So, and sometimes the girls are not accepted for those vacancies, and it's only now that we witness those positive practices, like, you know, there is a billboard as you enter Kiev that we're looking for drivers, both male and female. If when a woman looks at such a billboard, they understand that they're being looked for, because if you only mention driver, a woman may look at such billboard and understand that there are stereotypes, and probably they would not even have a chance in case they submit their application. And you know, in Dnipro, I was talking to one of my colleagues recently, and in Dnipro, at the public transport stops, and in the public transport, you know, there's only one female driver. So should the men be mobilized, it will result in transport system collapse. And you know, to get a D category driver's license, you have to have 3 years of experience. So you have to either be an owner of this category of transport or to be employed as a driver on this type of transport. And the heads of those transport companies, they should understand that those vacancies can only be filled promptly with the drivers with experience. I mean with the experience of driving, say, trolley buses or trams. And thus the government of every city, every community, they should think about it to understand whether those critically important specialists are sufficient in every area, and if the jobs are balanced in gender terms, not to wait for this type of transport collapse. Thank you very much, Mr. Oksana. We've discussed the figures. I mean, we've named the figures from the general staff, who says there are 47,000 women in the armed forces, and this figure has grown 40% with the beginning of the full-scale invasion. We understand that more and more women are joining the armed forces, but I agree what Ms. Milena was saying about the segregation at the level of training. To what extent does it create obstacles for the girls on their way to join the armed forces? Thank you very much for your question. Well, it was already mentioned before me. Now, in the armed forces of Ukraine, in all forces and branches, it's allowed for the females to take positions and to study all of the military professions. There is no legislative barrier anymore. Obviously, we can say there are specific cases that are being manipulated sometimes with, I remember in our military academy, like last summer, the journalists came up with this topic that the girls are not allowed to study to become airborne. And it turned out to be untrue. It's just that the girls have not submitted their applications for that profession. And it happened probably because sometimes the girls just don't know about their opportunities. And I know that probably the recruiting doesn't work properly, and they just don't know that they have a right to study for all of the professions. There are no restrictions coming from the Ministry of Defense anymore. We have professions
Величезний конкурс, це стосується і національної безпеки.
where the contest is real high, the competition is real high, but there are no legislative restrictions. I can mention some specific cases when some specific commanders don't want to have women promoted to some top-level positions, but again, that's discrimination. We have a hotline that accepts applications and complaints. So in case if it's a discrimination, we already have relevant paperwork approved that describe gender-based discrimination. So the problem is in specific people who discriminate other people, and if anything like that happens, the girls should knock on all of the doors and their problems will be solved. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Last year was the first year of graduation of the female officers. Well, look, we had female officers very, very long ago, but as it was said, not all of the professions were open for the women. We have colonels, female colonels, who are lawyers, finance people. They occupy officers' positions, but there were no battle positions open for women like artillery personnel, snipers, but again, it all was only adopted on a legislative level in 2018. Then there were regulations adopted in the armed forces, and as the girls entered higher educational institutions in 2018, they were going through different levels, tactical, operational, to improve their qualification. And now we only have these officers graduating, but they have all of the chances to continue their development, to grow up to the strategic level, to get relevant ranks. I hope that shortly we are about to have female generals in the armed forces, because until this moment we don't have any battle female general. There is a former commander of medical forces, but she's the general of medical forces, but in the armed forces there are no battle generals so far. So this process, this inertia that Svitlana has mentioned, I see sometimes it takes years for us to see those changes, when we see that women unite the rest of our society, so to say. Yes, we have to continue pushing. I want to thank all of the civil organizations who don't let us relax and sit back. You know, should we just stop for a second, this patriarchal society is going to hold us back again, because not all of the stereotypes are overcome so far. Miss Yaryna, so what is the role of the state in all of those processes? In your opinion, is the state staying aside of these processes, and if so, what should we do in the legal field to reinforce those processes? Like recently we've seen a publication in our media when a man was refused during the last phase of his interview after all of the tests were done and fulfilled, and he was responded that he would not get a job offer because he is of mobilization age, and for what we understand, the businesses are going through their adaptation to the challenges of time. So what are our expectations from the state? Thank you, Ms. Olga. Let me reflect over those opinions expressed by my colleagues and to answer your question. Well, you know, as we formulate our statements, our suggestions, we have to remember that we cannot create any feeling of guilt in women as if they're not ready to certain challenges of economy, because within millennia the women were told that their mission is different. They were not only bent, so to say, to do this verbally, but there was a whole infrastructure built around it when boys and girls with the same graduation rating from the high school, they enter a higher educational institution for an engineering profession, it becomes a bifurcation point where their opportunities becomes very different, and the girls having the same competences, the same potential, the same opportunities, the expectations to them were always different. The preference was given to their male colleagues because the girls potentially may become mothers, they may create families, they may go on a maternity leave, and the employers and the state were never thinking about how to not make this long pause on the way of their career growth, how to help them adapt to this environment, how to provide them with an opportunity to continue their career growth, because now we understand that the economy, all of the spheres are so dynamic that a 3 years break, well, I don't know what is the most stable profession, maybe as teacher. Even if you're a teacher, within 3 years you lose your qualification, the rules are changing, there are reformations going on in every area, and 3 years interruption is a huge challenge for any woman who wants to get back to their work later. So they should try to retrain for their profession right again. And if it's like 2 maternity leaves overlapping, say like 5 years, they create a gap which becomes a part of what we say a gender gap in salary. It's not like I'm paid $80 and my male colleague is making 100. That's a multi-layer process that are difficult to measure in time. And even now, as we talk about some trends of economy feminization, I would like to mention that probably both us and the state should predict it. Those trends are supposed to be predictable. I mean, it already happened in the beginning of the century after the First World War, until the 50s, the majority of the professions were closed for the women, and probably it would remain so. Probably it would take more time from the suffragists unless the war and reality, which has taken the labor force and forced everybody to adapt. But first of all, it was a challenge for the women because nobody has taken all other obligations from them. They were just added more work. Like now you have working shifts in the factories, and probably back then they were way longer than 8 hours. So I would like to make sure we don't formulate our expectations and suggestions as a potential claim to the women, to make sure they're ready to that. It's the responsibility of the state to create the infrastructure around it, like kindergartens, the opportunities to have the homework responsibilities of women relieved. There are some things that are not contemplated by the legislation, but there are some banal things like fresh food to be prepared every day. This is something that takes time, takes effort, and expecting a woman to cook and then to work as a public transport driver on top of all other work that they work is unfair and excessive, in my opinion. Also, it's worth understanding that sometimes the businesses, they adapt in a way that they can, but it's not always that it happens in a legal way. I think that examples that you were providing, they have some indicators or patterns of discrimination, but you know, the figures, they don't say anything. It's only a simplified picture of the world. We have to analyze them properly. I mean, it's just an assumption, but back in the year 2023, the vast majority of the companies that were opening, I mean, the newly registered businesses, were females. Does it always mean that we stimulated the women to start their own businesses? Probably so. But probably it's just a facade and some fake feminization related to the fact that the conscription age males, before they register a new company, they should have their data updated through the subscription office, and they just have their wives register those new businesses. Well, getting back to what a state can do, our analytical center JurFem this year, in the beginning of the year, we've issued a study in which we try to gather all of the resolutions of the European Union that regulate the stimulation of female entrepreneurship, which suggests some things that would help the labor market to get balanced in gender terms, to make sure that all of the people, no matter how do they identify themselves, get a fair access to this labor market. And there, if we generalize and simplify it, it's like it's access to the caregiver infrastructure. It's not always the responsibility of the government. It may be responsibility of a company or an agency where a person looks, because if we calculate it, we can hire a person who can take care of the children of my colleagues. It would be easier and cheaper for me than to lose those people. Then it's a matter of environment, because the matter of sexual harassment, stigmatized behavior, sexual violence, some discriminatory phenomena in traditionally male fields is something that continues existing. And if we expect, I'll get back to this example with the public transport, if women feel safe and secure there, well, I have doubts about it, because I know we don't have this formulated culture of perception of acceptable and non-acceptable behavior, and government should take a part in communication of these facts, because if we want to reinforce our economy, even regardless all of the mobilization processes, and again, I have to make a remark here, because we say that the men left for war, but putting a hand on our heart, we understand that the lack of professionals is not due to the fact that the men left for the front lines, but because they are experiencing different mental health condition. And I cannot say that we can expect any economic leaps without engaging a lot of workforce, but to do this we have to create the infrastructure where the women would be able to delegate their home responsibilities to others, and we have declared that we tolerate no violence, and talk more with those who still don't understand it. So before we proceed to the post-war reconstruction of our country, I'm having an important question to you. As experts, we understand that the process of changes is underway. We probably don't even understand the scale of the changes, but hopefully you, as experts, you've already analyzed what the problems and opportunities can be and how can we transform those problems into opportunities. Perhaps you've already done such an analysis and made such predictions. Well, talking about analysis, we didn't do any analysis, but talking about predictions and forecasts, I can surely say that what's happening now is in favor and to the advantage of the women, because the women are becoming professional now, both in the society and in the army, for example. Now a woman is a battle unit who has respect and is already perceived on par with the man. You know, in the ministry we've adopted an important resolution on the gender sensitive language. Like, we have to avoid all those Soviet era things, like, you know, a cool warrior is only a man, and if a woman is a good warrior, so it's a man wearing a skirt. So we have to avoid all of that, all of those wordings that humiliate the women. We have to cement it in the society that the women are important, they're professional, they are entitled to any positions of their choice, because what's going to happen after the war? I mean, our prediction, both for the society and the military, the men are coming back from the front lines and they say, okay, woman, your place is at the kitchen, please cook some delicious borscht. Yeah, hopefully your forecast is not coming true. Or yeah, some might say like there's a lot of men, so you ladies get back to your ladies thing. So we have to make sure that it doesn't happen. We have to cement our positions on all levels. We have to reinforce the role of the women in post-war recovery of the country, because the women have mastered all of the professions by now. When I'm seeing a female driver of an excavator that digs a trench, well, it's cool. The women can do anything. Milena, do you share this forecast? Well, I would like to support my call. It's important to think about how we communicate this process when the women fill those positions that were traditionally considered men's. It's important not to position it as a temporary phenomena, some, you know, like a tender shoulder that the women lean to support the men during the war. No, it's a balance of the labor market that makes our economy, our businesses more economically sustainable and competitive. And in a global sense, it improves the defense capabilities. It's important to demonstrate how the reformation of the labor market is going on. And we again should demonstrate it as not temporary process, because otherwise, as Ms. Oksana has mentioned, after the end of the war we will be witnessing this recoiling, the restriction of women's rights, just in the way it happened after the World War II in Europe and in the United States and basically in many other countries. Well, as we talk about feminization of economy and women's professions and excess, you know, it's only the tip of the iceberg. You know, only the top of all of those profound processes going on inside the society, because currently in Ukraine the salary gap is 20%. Discrimination is still there. The government of Ukraine just recently adopted a national program on equalization, And the figure set there until the year 2020 to reduce this salary gap 5% down to 13%. But probably that would be the right movement during the peacetime. But what's happening now? The women have undertaken a large fraction of work, both in physical labor and communications in different areas of economy. But how a woman can go and work and stay active if there is no kindergarten, right? Or if they work remotely? Then promotion. Would the businesses want to promote her in their career qualification? If you lose a year or two, you cannot do it longer on the same level. Then blackouts. What should we do about them? I see what's going on, but I'm afraid that those women who remain in Ukraine in August will be leaving for abroad so that their children can continue education. And about 7 million of our women of fertile age, they are still abroad. I'm talking about recovery and reconstruction. I mean, that's a lot of people who live there abroad for 2 years. They found new jobs. I can give you an example, like in Poland, more than 1% have come to the pension funds from Ukraine, and Ukrainians are the first among those open and private companies in Poland. But again, if women have opportunity, they have professional qualification, they take part in reconstruction, what will be the level of their salaries? Are they going to be on the same level or lower or higher? Because the employers, they think like, we're gonna hire a woman and pay 20% less. I mean, we still have to calculate all those things, how to bring back those who are about to rebuild the country. So we have to think about preservation of human capital and education of highly professional employees. That's a big question in terms of recovery. Then the role of women in the government. Like you know, now the government is all, local governments are almost all female, but such discriminatory standards, you know, this resolution 59 or 69 that prohibits the deputies of the local councils to live abroad, even for some volunteer or charity missions, that's humiliating. And many women have resigned. I know during Ukrainian Women's Congress we were discussing a story. A woman was a local council deputy, and her son was fighting in Azov, taken prisoner of war, and she couldn't live abroad to promote like fighting for his freedom. She had to resign. So now even talking about even the elections to come, what will be the role of women in decision-making process when the reconstruction plans will be built on the levels of the local councils, local governments? So here it goes one by one, so to say. Dear friends, do we have any questions on the floor? Please let us know if so. And I would like to touch upon this topic that you've mentioned. Ms. Svitlana said that we have to have the businesses engaged in those processes. We keep reading about businesses complaining that there is a huge lack of personnel. Everybody provides some horrific figures. And can you please so to say, uncover this topic for the businesses. What are their opportunities with regard to the women? What can they do not to lose their opportunities, and how they could transform their businesses in view of the current circumstances? Well, I had an opinion about what you're saying, so let me try to answer. I think that the last year, the employment centers, they were communicated that they had a lot of vacancies and a lot of people looking for jobs. The problem was that the professions of those people were not compliant with the profiles of those vacancies. There was an example of Mariupol, for example, a large industrial city, and after the Russian invasion, a lot of people moved from there. All those people are somewhere, or part of those people are still in Ukraine. They are below pension age, below retirement age, but the labor market doesn't see them as a potential for them. That's another discriminatory standard related to the age. But if the businesses are oriented to have those people engaged, we should think about how we can adapt and improve their skills to find the opportunities for those people to retrain and to do what's necessary for those vacancies. I don't believe, well, probably in like chemistry or rocket science, there are some fields where it's quite difficult to retrain, but there are management positions, there are some logistics positions and other services where a person can get retrained if all of the parties to the process really want to do so. Obviously, it's probably the primary responsibility of the employment centers, but we understand the state, the government will always be slower in their response to the existing challenges. And if you allow me, I would like to get back to the matter of reconstruction. We all understand that reconstruction, well, hopefully the war ends soon and we proceed to other problems, to the solution of other problems, but we understand that the reconstruction is not 1 year, not even 5-year process, and in view of the current situation, within certain period we probably will not be saying that we don't have enough men or women. We will talk generally about the employees, the workers, the people, the deficit in the labor market, the huge gap, the demographic gap, and now we have to discuss how we can stimulate the childbirth, expecting from the women to continue their labor activity. But this is something we have to think about now, because back in 2012 we had pretty high level of birth and it kept falling on, and during COVID the situation was already real complex. And you know, talking about years 22, 23, you know, you better don't even think about it. But again, is the responsibility of the state, of the government, to think about how to find the way out of this situation, because Ukraine has a lot of territory, and probably in 15 to 20 years, I think that many leading sociologists were saying it. We may double check, but I think that within 15 to 20 people, we will have no people left to move the economy to ensure the growth in all of the areas, because the people will not be here just physically. Thank you very much. Let's give the floor to Ms. Svitlana. Let me just say a couple of words how to communicate with businesses as representatives of different women's organizations. You know, for us the matter of women's professions and adaptation was topic number one. We not only demonstrated it on the best cases on the role models, but we've also presented different other successful cases, and not only presented, we were disseminating that information to other businesses. First of all, everything related to veterans, their socialization, how to get them employed, and the same story with the women. Those cases exist. They exist since year 2020. We just have to push them harder, and the state on its end should encourage businesses with privileges, taxes, and is the role of the Ministry of Economy how they would work with those businesses, because businesses are like that. Let me give you the example of Poland. To have both men and women work, they have a subsidy, a government subsidy, like 2,500 zloty for childcare. If both parents are employed, you can pay those money to the kindergarten, to a private kindergarten, because they have problem with the public kindergartens. Or you can, for example, hire a nanny. So those are the methods that stimulate the women's engagement in economic processes. Let me add something else in continuation of what my colleagues mentioned. I like the experience of Czech Republic. We were visiting them with a training visit recently, and they have a program developed for the women. There are children's rooms opened at many government agencies. When women continue their careers, they may leave their children at those children's rooms where they can be taken care of. So we should open such children's rooms in government agencies, in different big businesses, to relieve the women from those thoughts like, where is my kid? When should I pick them up from the kindergarten or from the school? So again, those the responsibilities of the government. We can now open companies connected to Ukroboronprom defense industry, and we can have more women engaged in this work of defense of the country. But again, it's the government policy, so we have to address our people's deputies, to those who support the initiatives, and we should open the companies, the businesses on a government, on a state level, to increase the jobs, the number of jobs, to get more women hired. And when I hear about the salary gap, I proudly say that the only organization where there is no salary gap is the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The salary of service people is the same regardless the gender or age. I would like to suggest a number of recommendations for different actors on how to mitigate the gender misbalance in the labor force, and how to get more women engaged in work in those professions that will be important for reconstruction. Again, the role of the government, of the state, is very important, just as well as the role of the higher educational institutions. They have their admission campaigns for engineering professions, machine construction, agrarian, all those fields where there is a gender misbalance existing. Those companies, they should target the girls, the women, saying that they are waited for there without discrimination, sexism, with good salaries and all the right stuff. And it's important for the government institutions and the higher educational institutions to set up better connections with the businesses so that the students can train in their professions, which will improve their chances as they get employed after the graduation. And the employment services, they should aim their efforts at retraining women for other professions. It's important for Ukrainian state and international donors who usually finance such programs. For example, for the women who have not been working for a long time, we may say that an easy way to get back to work is to master such traditionally female professions as in the beauty industry, but there is nothing impeding them from mastering better paid professions like construction working or agriculture. We just have to make sure we don't walk this stereotypic way. Like a woman who had left on a maternity leave is capable of doing more than just making eyelashes. And again, we haven't mentioned banks and different exemption lending programs to stimulate the businesses. Usually they are aimed at both male and female, but unfortunately we had this survey during which the women were stating that they really sense discrimination in this area if they want to open a car maintenance station or other businesses that traditionally are not considered to be female. They get refused and they really suffer from certain discrimination as they see it. So for women opening a business, especially in such a sphere which is not considered to be a traditional female work, it's pretty difficult. And talking about the employers, they should address the vacancies for both men and women. They should emphasize that they're looking for both genders, and we should create the conditions not only for the men but for women too to cooperate with local governments. And if the company employees don't have a place to leave their kids and they cannot afford building a private kindergarten for themselves, I mean, the business, probably a couple of businesses can get united and to work with the local government to find a solution that will result both in tax proceeds growth for that community, to work better with the professional technical schools and higher educational institutions to stimulate the study of the girls. Yeah, we also have to review the system of government orders so that the government doesn't only order lawyers and economists. We have to review those plans and to find out what professions will be in highest demand within a year or 2 or 3. And just like Ms. Yaryna has mentioned, we have to think about the program for the employment centers, how to have the people aged 60 plus engaged. That's the category of people who only take care about their land plots, specifically in rural communities, but it's a huge part of the labor force. There should be a specific program to have those people working for the economy actively. Thank you very much. It's important also in the army too, because we have a lot of men and women who are 40 plus, 50 plus, and soon many of them will retire because they will reach that 60 years age, who still have a lot of energy, a lot of knowledge, skills, experience, people who can be of use to the state even if they don't serve with the army anymore, but their potential can be used in the rear. Well, I would like to thank you for this conversation. I think it was real comprehensive. Our expectations to the government and those recommendations that you've provided to our businesses. Thank you very much. So again, let's work on it. Equal rights are equal opportunities for all of us. It would be real good if even in such critical situations for a country, we will be able to transform promptly and to transform other ongoing processes in favor of our victory. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, and see you next week. Stay tuned.
Може, зробимо спільне фото? Бажаємо, правда.